Hello, and I welcome you to Skirmish Turf. If you're a returning viewer, I apologize. It's been way too long. If you're new, I'm not sure what brought you here, but I welcome you nonetheless. I'll be taking you through a world-building project of mine that takes place in a fantasy world where the gods died and magic has been destroyed. A realm in which the atom was split not through science at first, but through a dark spell that would shatter the foundations of this world forever. The gods were cruel beings and played favorites. They created races that they saw as perfect in a particular aspect. The dwarves were the perfect architects, the elves the perfect artisans, and the orcs the perfect warriors. Then there were races like us, the humans. We were merely apes plucked from trees that the gods molded into usable slaves. We rebelled and won a war that would see the children of the gods slain, wiped extinct and their forms to be forgotten. Well, almost all their children. Indeed, there remains a few of the gods' creations that still live in the world of Skirmish Turf. One of them is the Cyclops, one of the most recognizable monsters from Greek mythology aside from every other monster from Greek mythology. It's always been a personal favorite monster of mine. Something so brilliantly simple about a monster that is just a giant man with one eye. I've always been a sucker for one-eyed monsters. It's why Gigan has always been my top Godzilla antagonist for me, even if his movies suck. One of my favorite depictions of the Cyclops is from the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Aside from the beautiful stop-motion animation, I've always loved its design. It takes something basic and manages to add to it in a way that feels natural, as if this was always what a Cyclops has looked like, even if it has several borrowed elements from other mythical creatures. I wanted to see if I could do something similar but reimagine the Cyclops as a different kind of beast, although my first thought didn't go towards a one-eyed giant. When I first came up with the idea of Skirmish Turf, I had several basic concepts I had come up with. Ideas like humans in the Velmeg were there from the beginning. I wanted most races in Skirmish Turf to be around human size with a few exceptions. I wanted a giant of some kind but couldn't decide on what. My initial idea was the concept of fallen dragons. The idea was that due to magic no longer existing, dragons lost their ability to fly and were stuck on the ground. As time went on, they shrank in size but still kept their intelligence. They would have been very vengeful and yearned to fly, so they would have gathered in secret, forming covens that would slowly allow them to research and develop their technology. Eventually, the fallen dragons would fly again and create these jetpack things that would allow them to take to the skies again. I abandoned this idea for a couple of reasons. For Skirmish Turf, I want to maintain a balance between realism, silliness, and awesome, and dragons with jetpacks was just way too silly. Additionally, the idea that dragons could just hide away in caves and go completely undiscovered seems stupid. They would require a massive amount of resources, so that would put them in direct competition with humans and the other races. Even if they made their covens in areas that no one in their right mind would live in, that raises another question. How the hell are they maintaining themselves? Then I began wondering how much fuel a dragon-sized jetpack would consume, how much that would weigh, and what would be the balance between weight and fuel, plus weapon weight because they no longer breathe fire, and then I just gave up on the idea. I'm going to use the idea of fallen dragons in the future, it's just going to be reworked into something else entirely. I kept getting that itch though, that giants could work in Skirmish Turf. How though? How could giant targets survive in a world of guns? The giants would need a level of dexterity and eyesight to operate their own guns, plus be smart enough to manufacture them. That's when I realized the Cyclops would be perfect. In the Odyssey, the Cyclops were described as fairly intelligent beings who made sheep cheese. While Homer described them as entitled, I'd imagine these Cyclops would have learned to be much more resourceful. With that decided, I began a rough sketch. I wanted my Cyclops to have two trunks, and believe it or not, the idea originated from another idea I've had. A while ago, I was coming up with a concept for aliens, and one such idea was an elephant-like race as seen here. Seeing how intelligent elephants are on Earth, I figured an alien race that resembled them could be interesting. While I abandoned the project, I liked the concept of it, so I modified it to seem more fantasy. After that, I began drawing. The biggest thing you'll notice is the dual trunks. While unusual, it's a fairly common trope in sci-fi once you get looking. I was in part influenced by C.M. Kozman's work in how he manages to make the weirdest yet seemingly plausible organisms ever. That, and I'm sure you've heard the rumor that ancient Greeks saw the skulls of extinct dwarf elephants and thought they were one-eyed giant human monsters. While there is no evidence to support this, you can see the connection. So I thought a Cyclops with two trunks would be interesting. They serve as the more calibrated of the appendages, with their arms serving as brute strength and their trunks allowing for precision work. To further aid in this, each trunk possesses fingers that are as dexterous as our thumbs. This allows for them not only to hold big guns, but maintain them as well. I wanted their form to be very distinct from human anatomy. My initial sketches were way too humanoid for my liking, so I redid it to give them a more rotund and pillar-like structure. It is a little difficult to convey a massive size with a big head, but the large arms and tree trunk legs do make up for it. Things like that are obvious choices. What wasn't obvious, though, was the feet. I knew I wanted to do something weird with the feet, but what that was took me a while to figure out. Elephants' feet were too obvious, so I initially went with a weird hoof design that had one big toe at the front and two smaller ones at the back. To put it bluntly, I hated it. I played around with different designs for a bit, with some inspirations coming from sauropod's feet, hence why at one point they had a weird curved spur. For the final design, I took inspiration from giraffe hooves for the front. I feared a cliché foot pattern would detract from the design, so I knew I needed to push it to be weirder. Then I remembered that elephants are technically always on their toes, and that most of their foot is fat. So, what if instead of fat, it was some weird mass of cartilage that resembled a hoof heel? Then to encase it, I added a redundant spur, and it was perfect. Something about the spur felt right, as if that's how it was always meant to be. The foot was weird, but not too unrecognizable, so I knew it was right. Alright, enough talk about feet. God, that's a weird sentence to say. Let's talk about the head. The head of the Cyclops was mostly taken from my alien elephant idea, but modified slightly. One idea I kept was the crest. Aside from having a trunk mustache, the Cyclops of Skirmish Turf have crests on the top of their heads. Their mouths also open from side to side instead of up and down like most animals on Earth do. Now, as for the why behind it. The mouth is a simple explanation. I just thought it was neat. That's it. It just seemed cool and weird. The head crest came from the alien, but while it served as a simple display on the original design, I expanded it for the Skirmish Turf design. I decided that the crest would function like hair to them. Different Cyclops have different crests. They can clip it and stylize it to change the shape of it depending on their mood or whatever Cyclops crest trends are floating around that month. It's similar in structure to a rooster comb, albeit with less nerves in them, so it doesn't hurt to modify. I kept the crest simple for this drawing to show what the default is. Funnily enough, the thing I put the least amount of thought into was the eye. I knew the thing people would focus on the most on the one-eyed monster would be its one eye, so I knew it had to be colorful. I actually considered giving the Cyclops a compound eye due to their sheer complexity. I didn't because compound eyes tend to have poor image quality, and a compound eye on an otherwise mammalian creature pushed things from a fantasy creature into an alien. Other than that, the eye was a simple endeavor for me. I wanted it to look complex as if it could do things that our eyes can't. They have vision that works well regardless of light level and can even see colors our eyes can't. Now there are some things that don't check out with this version of a Cyclops. The cross pupil, while cool, would be impractical as it would let less light in than a simple circle pupil. Additionally, none of its anatomy really makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. But here is the fun part. They aren't a naturally selected species. The Cyclops were created by gods, so therefore I will not be taking any criticism. Enough yapping about the design process. How do Cyclops fit into this world? It started way back in the ancient days. The gods made the Cyclops to be the farmers, those who could harvest the land and do it best. Of course, they mostly used slaves to do it because this is skirmish turf and the past was awful. While many choose to live this life, many other Cyclops choose to leave their settled lives and instead explore the world and get away from their brethren's debauchery. This proved to be the right choice, as the Cyclops who stayed were killed either by being poisoned by their slaves or killed in battle. Thus, when the magic of this world was destroyed, the dragons fell from the skies, and the children of the gods were erased. The Cyclops that survived held no grudges, for they knew the fall of the gods was inevitable. While the elves, dwarves, and orcs had been completely eradicated, the giants still stood tall. Although by Cyclops standards, the modern Skirmish Turf descendants are considered to have suffered from dwarfism. Even though they stand at anywhere from 3 to 5 meters or 10 to 15 feet, they are still shorter than the ancient Cyclops, which often stood at twice that height. No modern Cyclops gets that big because gravity is a bitch. Now, their relationship with other races is all over the place to say the least. The size difference is of course the biggest hurdle, as people tend to possess some kind of fear over things that can squish them. Throughout the ages in which armies used swords and spears, the Cyclops were the most feared and respected. Their sheer girth was unmatched on the battlefield, and only the mightiest of kingdoms could even hope to stand up to even a petty state of Cyclops. So as a result, most either avoided them or did their best to get on their good side. But technology changes, and so does war. The invention of gunpowder was devastating on the rule of Cyclops. Their bulk, which was once their greatest strength, was now their greatest weakness. Much like the decline of war elephants and, hell, even cavalry, cannons and muskets saw the decline of beasts in war. The many Cyclops empires fell, and those who remained only did so because of good relations or because they weren't worth the effort of conquest. As a result, their populations dwindled and the other races began to rise. However, after hundreds of years, the states that overthrew the giants were toppled themselves. Then the Cyclops species would adapt to the modern way of life, learning how to create machinery themselves. New wars were fought, and suddenly the Cyclops were making a comeback. Not nearly as large as they used to be, but still an improvement from where they were before. When certain nations attempted to subdue these bumbling giants, they would be met with a terrifying surprise. Cyclops no longer resembled barbarians with clubs, but walking tanks with enough firepower to wipe out legions. No longer was their strength and size used to wield great swords, but used to carry enough ammunition to cut down anything smaller than them. The terror they once inflicted was felt once again. Now, as epic as that sounds, it's not what I chose to depict here. I decided to try to depict a part of life that a Cyclops might live. I still wanted an excuse to practice with guns though, so I needed an occupation that would require high caliber persuaders. I settled on making the Cyclops poachers. I wanted that as an excuse to explain why they had certain human things, and more importantly, I watched Mandalore Gaming's video on Cabela's dangerous hunts before drawing, so that might have had some influence. My headcanon is that these two are a father and son duo. How can you tell they're male? Because if they're female, they would possess a pouch, obviously. Cyclops and Skirmish Turf have pouches, by the way. Anyhow, these two are poachers, illegally hunting on foreign land to acquire not just big game, but giant game to sell in the black market. And yes, there are some animals in Skirmish Turf that require literal military hardware to take down. The more level-headed father possesses a rifle and is looking out for potential danger. His more hot-headed son possesses a machine gun, ready to fire down anything that gets in their way. These two obviously didn't have the means to have legal equipment, so they stole it from a military base after distracting everyone with a forest fire. The rifle is an artillery cannon, normally designed to fire explosives at fortified positions. It's been modified to chamber rifle rounds, or at least what a Cyclops considers a rifle round. The son is using a stolen heavy machine gun, designed to fit on an escort truck. He mostly modified it to fit a trigger for his larger finger and put a lever on it to pull back the bolt when reloading. I honestly love their design. It manages to look extremely hillbilly, but still has that diesel punk meets fantasy look I'm going for. Another benefit to design is that their stolen human crap not only tells a funny story, but gives a sense of scale to how massive they are. Heavy guns normally only moved with vehicles or handheld for them. Instead of a belt strap, the father uses a ratchet strap. The son uses armor that would normally cover a large portion of a person or a vehicle to cover a body part. I mean, the father is using an entire lamppost as his walking stick. A walking stick. A lamppost that is severely overly designed for what it is because diesel punk. I'd say the only thing that didn't come through with the design was the gas can. It's meant to be a canteen, but that isn't clear at all. I was going to have him sipping from it when sketching, but I wanted to have his trunk in a more dynamic pose, so I changed it. That, and I didn't want it to look like he was drinking gas. So that's my version of a Cyclops, one of the few remaining sentient races of the gods that avoided annihilation. Will there be more? Maybe, I'll see. But now I want to hit you with a thought experiment. If this is what something as simple as a Cyclops looks like, what did the elves, dwarves, and orcs look like? You might assume they would have the form of a human with certain differences, but considering how alien the Cyclops are, how bizarre were the other races? Let me give you an example. In modern Skirmish Turf, there are no written descriptions of what an elf looks like. They are described in a handful of texts as having pointed ears, being tall, and having a fondness for the human form. So many contemporary depictions in Skirmish Turf of elves are that of a tall, pointed-eared human. Then, writings on a temple wall reveal that one elf could fire multiple bows at once. So, what did they mean by this? Did the elves merely use magic, or did they have multiple limbs for drawing multiple bows? Is it a mistranslation? Were the elves firing multiple bows literally, or were they just firing multiple arrows at once? Did them having a fondness for the human form mean they wanted to look human, or was it just curiosity? Or was it much more sinister? What this is getting at is that it's been so long that no one knows jack shit about what the children of the gods looked like, and the Cyclops are our only clue. Many ancient descriptions of Cyclops only provide the one eye as an example, and the ability to be incredibly brutish, but also being incredibly delicate. They mention nothing about the trunks, crest, or hell, even the blue skin. Additionally, all depictions of the enslavers were destroyed, and their bodies desecrated beyond recognition. It's as if those who saw them wanted them to be forgotten, and considering how monstrous their actions were, it probably should remain that way. To me, it adds a sense of mystery to the setting and sparks the imagination. Plus, as a bonus, it means I don't have to design them, so hooray for laziness. Even in the modern day, the Cyclops aren't well understood. What doesn't help is that the Cyclops can't really talk or hear like we can. Cyclops and Skirmish Turf communicate with grunts, bellows, snorts, and whistles, so it's basically impossible to decipher their language. They also don't quite hear like we do. They have a strange purple organ on the sides of their necks that act like an ear. It's not understood how it picks up noise, but it sure does. No one in Skirmish Turf understands Cyclops biology, and they aren't exactly willing to give up a dead body for us to dissect. What few autopsies have been done on Cyclops only raised more questions than answers because remember, these are not organisms that adapt traits based off of natural selection. They were handcrafted by gods to their twisted idea of perfection, so some things function well without us knowing how. While good relations do exist with the other races in Skirmish Turf, there is too much inherently different for there to be true understanding of the Cyclops. Or at least what I've been calling a Cyclops. I've been thinking about what to name them, and I've decided on the Solgaze. Soul for one, and gaze for eye. It's not that hard to figure out. I spent like 5 minutes on something that should have taken 5 seconds. But other than that, yeah, that's my take on the Cyclops. The Solgaze. Bizarre blue-skinned beings who are massive, have 2 trunks, and can see what we can't. There were some things I wanted to go over but couldn't fit in, so I'll put them here. Solgaze can regenerate their eye. While they take a while to recover other wounds like the rest of us, their eye heals rapidly. There have been multiple reports of their eyes being shot out and going blind, but then making a full recovery. I thought about making the trunk a nose, like each nostril had a separate trunk. I guess I didn't go with it because it just didn't feel right for some reason, I just can't explain. Also, we don't know how long a Solgaze can live for. There are several Solgaze that have been alive for hundreds of years, and there are rumors of one that is as old as the days of gods. So yeah, the Solgaze, a reimagining of a classic monster I hope you enjoyed. If you just want to stare at the art until the video ends, you can mute my voice and I won't be offended even slightly, I promise. As for some longtime viewers, I wanted to thank you for your patience. I take way too long with these videos. The anamatic you saw at the beginning of the video took me forever to make. I wanted to have some creative shots in it, so I hope it was worth the wait. It also didn't help that I switched to a different software when making it, so that took some adjustment. I really wanted this new video to feel special, so I created the opening scenario to give a glimpse into Skirmish Turf. I know it's not exactly top-notch, but it's what I could muster. I know the audio isn't the greatest, but I'm not an expert on that, so I apologize if it sounded bad in some parts. Believe me, even bare bones animations take time. If you don't believe me, download Krita and try it yourself. It's free, so if you've got the space and time, try it out. That, and there's another reason this took so long to make. For my 2025 summer, I was working on another massive video project for another channel that still isn't even remotely done. I'm also doing this channel alongside working, finding a new job, hanging out with friends, and earning an associate's degree. So, as you can imagine, it takes a lot out of you. Most days I just didn't have the energy to do art. But good news is that I've graduated. Hopefully then I can get more of this world developed. I enjoy drawing and writing, but god, I hate recording. If it didn't sound like shit, I would just use a text-to-speech voice. Well, that's all. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the Solgaze as much as I've enjoyed creating them. Sorry for my voice if you find it annoying. It's what I'm stuck with. Have a great new year. Until next time, stay safe and have a good one.